Okay, what's up YouTube? I'm back with another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the Catholic Church and the Transatlantic slave trade and the Noah's curse that's in the Bible. Now, this is I'm coming to you again with this book, The Africans Wrote the Bible. Right, I'm going to read to you what the author says in here. Right, I'm going to expound upon what he says. So it says here, this is on page 167. It says the popular Noah's curse. Christians in Europe claim to have found the evidence of European superiority and the biblical mandate for Europeans to enslave Africans in their interpretation of the so-called Noah's curse in Genesis 9:20-26. From a rather far-fetched interpretation of the biblical story, Europeans never understood or knew its origin. Christian Europe used the story of a drunken Noah whose son Ham saw his nakedness but did not cover him. Noah's sons Shem and Japheth went and covered their drunken father's nakedness. It's never happened. This is all story and myth, but let's keep on going. As a result, when drunken Noah woke up, he decided to bless the two sons who covered his shame, and cursed instead his grandson from the son who refused to cover his shame. What is most intriguing about this story is that Noah did not curse his son Ham, who had offended him directly, but he cursed Canaan, his grandson, and the son of Ham instead. Other than a drunken man's logic, how logical is this? Why would Noah curse his grandson instead of the son who offended him? Who but a drunken man would think this way to do such a thing? Nevertheless, Noah is said to have blessed his other sons Japheth and Shem to enslave the descendants of their brother Ham for failing to cover his drunken father's shame. What is interesting about this story is that Christians believed this curse was true, and Christian Europe believed its God supported this logic and curse. Without any understanding or knowledge of the source of this story, Christian Europe conferred the so-called blessings of drunken Noah on themselves, and the curse of Canaan on black people, the Africans. That was not difficult to do because Africans were already enslaved in Europe. So Christian Europe conveniently interpreted this biblical story to mean that the descendants of Ham were the Africans who were already enslaved in fulfillment of the so-called Noah's curse. Excuse me. However, this same Bible reveals that black people are not the descendants of Ham, but because Europeans do not have the linguistics, cultural, and tribal background to understand these biblical stories, they have never known this for almost 2,000 years. This is a long time to wallow in biblical ignorance. The revelation of the fact that black people are not the descendants of Ham is part of the revelation of this work, and it will be presented in coming discussions. However, who would today accept the curse, blessing, and story of a drunken character as the religious truth, other than people who do not know where the story came from in the first place? Nevertheless, all of these fabrications were slowly reinforcing, shaping, and influencing early Western European thinking and scholarship about Africa and Africans. Now let's get on to the transatlantic slave trade and the Catholic Church, because they were involved in it. So this is on page 171 in his book, The Catholic Church and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. He says, again, Western historians have told the story of the transatlantic slave trade as if it had nothing to do with Christianity or the Catholic Church. If the Catholic Church, as the most powerful political, social, economic, and spiritual institution of Europe, did not legitimize the slave trade, this uncoincidable trade in humans could not have gone on for centuries. It would have died out as soon as it started. Initially, European enslavement of the Africans was centered in Europe, Here is the involvement of the Catholic Church in the transatlantic slave trade that brought millions of Africans into the plantation of misery in the Americas. Once again, the Catholic Church's involvement was instrumental in extending the enslavement of Africans from Europe to America. In the 16th century, a Spanish slave merchant named Juan Sepulveda argued that Native Americans were barbarians and therefore they must be taken as slaves, as Aristotle had written. However, the Catholic missionaries that had gone to settle among the Native Americans did not agree that the pagans they were trying to Christianize should be taken as slaves. So a Catholic Dominican called Bartolome de la Casa argued powerfully that Native Americans were humans who must be evangelized and treated as free men. The Catholic Church agreed. So in the papal bull Sublimi Dues in 1537, the Church proclaimed that Native Americans could receive the Catholic faith and sacraments. This is evidence of how powerful the Church was in the historical events of the plunder and enslavement of human beings in foreign lands. The Dominican Bartolome de la Casa, while seeking to free Native Americans from slavery, suggested to the Catholic Church that as free humans they were entitled to the Catholic faith and sacrament. Native Americans could not be used as free labor in the new European plantations in the Americas. Instead, de la Casa suggested that Africans should be brought and used as free labor in the Americas. The Church agreed, and soon European slave traders found a new and expanded market for African slaves in the Americas. That was what blossomed into the infamous transatlantic slave trade, in which millions of Africans were brought to the Americas. Okay, so I'm gonna keep on reading this, but on the slave trade, right? It's seeming that majority of the stuff is coming from the Catholic Church, right? They were involved in it. It's been historically documented, right? Now, as far as what a boat said, I still haven't seen what a boat said. You know what I'm saying? What a boat said if all this stuff took place. Let's keep on going. It says, from this onward time, deliberate discrimination against African people became open and evident. Black people became the butts of European denigration, as they were accused of everything from being cursed in the eyes of God to responsibilities for crimes of incest and castration. Generations of Western Europeans have since been born and educated into believing, accepting, living, and practicing the immorality of the denigration of the African. Most Western European scholars from Shakespeare, Poe, and Melville took these false European perceptions of black people and used them in their literature, thus furthering academizing and legitimizing and propagating these false ideas to the next and later generations. In the free and open field of European assertions of superiority over Africans without proof or challenge, everything imaginable was fabricated as evidence of the Africans' inferiority and the European superiority. As Leon Poliakoff pointed out in his summary of the works of Professor W.D. Jordan, quote, when the most primitive European passions sought expression through pseudo-scientific generalizations, even travelers' tales were enough to transform fantasies about the bestiality of blacks and the anthropological theories. It says, however, very few in our generation are aware that all of these began from the introduction of religion to Europe and European misunderstanding and misuse of the theosophical concepts that became Christianity. From the Bible to academic racism. Now listen to this. The passing of Christian Europe racist and misinterpretation of the Bible into academic knowledge and learning became necessary for the works of early academic scholars to be recognized and accepted by Christians in Europe. In 1666, Georgius Hornius, a professor of Leiden University and the author of Arca Noe Siva Historia Emporium, asserted that Christian Europe's biblical interpretation of the origins of Europeans and Noah's son Japheth was correct. He says, I wonder how this professor would feel today if he found out what I'm about to reveal, and also that the fact that the story of the biblical flood and characters in it are all myths. Nevertheless, Professor Hornius asserted that in his research, he had found out the evidence confirming that the descendants of Noah were divided into the Japhites, who became the white people, the Shemites, who became the yellow people, and the Hamites, who were the black people. The writings of Hornius established and legitimized skin color as one of the criteria of inferiority and superiority. Blackness was perceived to be evil, and whiteness was to be perceived as purity. Instantly, the African's dark skin color became his greatest mark of identity, inferiority, and denigration. Not all European scholars were willing to follow the legendary line lore to please the church or their fellow Europeans. However, it was not easy for scholars who found out the truth about Africans to say it, and certainly it was not easy for the few Western scholars who knew that the assertions against black people were not true to speak out. Against the denigration of the black skin, some scholars quietly asserted that black skin is the original color of human skin, and therefore the black skin was more superior to white skin. This assertion prompted Pierre Louis de Marpetius, 1698 to 1759, the president of the Academy of Science of Berlin under Frederick II, to respond to such scholars. In his dissertation, says in this work, he argued that because black people occasionally have albinos who may be considered white skin was the original color of humans, and therefore white skin was more superior to black skin. He wrote, quote, "One might perhaps conclude from these unexpected births of white children among black peoples that white is the primitive color of mankind, while black is only a variation which has become hereditary in the course of centuries, but which has not entirely effaced the white color, the latter tending always to reappear. For one never sees the contrary phenomenon. One never sees black children born of white ancestors. This would perhaps be sufficient to conclude that white is the color of primitive man, and that it is only due to some accident that black has become the hereditary color of the great families which populate the torrid zone, amongst which nevertheless the primitive color is not so completely effaced that it does not occasionally reappear. This difficulty as the origin of the Negroes, so often reiterated, and which some people would like to use to contradict the stories taught by Genesis, that all the peoples of the earth issued from a single father and mother. This difficulty is removed if one admits an argument which is at least as worthy of credit as all that which has so far been imagined to explain the problem of generation. It says the most important point in this quotation is the admission of Marpetius that Western scholars have been imagining all kinds of falsehoods to explain their wishes of origin and self-conferred superiority. Alright, but I can't go into it all in this book, but you can, like I said, pick up this book. It's called The Africans Who Wrote the Bible, right?